welcome back again to Series of Opinions, episode number 18. We are still talking about Hamilton, and we are still three women who are discussing the best and worst of media. And yeah, Hamilton just couldn't be contained to one episode, so we're back with a second episode. Yeah. I'm KJ.
I'm Faith.
And I'm Moira.
And so, yeah, like I said, still talking about Hamilton, but before we get into that, anyone have any more recommendations?
I do have one. I watched the first half of the first season, and it's so incredible. The show called Big Sky is so incredible. You guys have to watch it. It's so good. The way, even like looking back and watching like commercials that they had run for this show is so well done, so that you don't know like who's bad in the show and who's good, or even who's alive. I mean, the first episode, a character dies that we're led to believe in the commercials is like a player throughout. So
I like that a lot.
It's about two teenage girls that go missing, and these two female private investigators are trying to figure out like where they are and what happened to them, and trying to find them. So it's so good. You guys have to watch it.
I fully intended to watch this because I sent you the trailer and said,
literally,
this looks good. And Faith watched half a season and I haven't watched it yet.
It's so good. It's so good. You have to watch it.
Moira, did you have any more recommendations?
I have no recommendations for this week because I haven't done much. So
I have been kicking it back with some old school television. Again, I mean, last week's recommendation was Charmed, which was 90s. I have another 90s recommendation, and that's Boy Meets World, and of course Girl Meets World as well, but I've been watching Boy Meets World.
That's incredible.
And it's actually fun. Like, I think I've seen most of the episodes before, but like I've missed a lot of like the middle ones, and like watching it like all in a row is really fun. Like, I got to the end of, I think, season 2 or 3, and then the next season is like they all hit, all the kids, especially Corey, the main kid, like that's when he hit puberty, was between those 2 seasons. He looks really different. He's all of a sudden aged a lot over this like one summer.
I love it.
But yeah, that's really good. And then there's a Disney reboot that ran for 3 seasons, and it's really good as well.
It is. I support that recommendation.
I second that.
Recommendations all around. All right, so I think we should just get back into it because we still have a lot of Hamilton content to cover.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you somehow listened to our first episode last week and didn't watch Hamilton, maybe go do that again. We will still be here. All right. So the first thing we're going to talk about is Eliza versus Alexander. Who is the titular Hamilton?
I think you should start, because a lot of these questions KJ wrote, so yeah. I know that you wrote them knowing that you had somewhere to go with it, so I'm really interested to hear what you say.
So I actually believe that Eliza is the underdog real star of the show.
I support.
Eliza, like Elizabeth Schuyler Hamilton, was actually an incredible human being. She lived to be 97 years old. She had 7 children with Alexander Hamilton, and he died when he was 49.
Yeah, wow.
Like, she just had so much life to live, and she just spent, like, so much of her life, like, campaigning for him, and, like, yes, Alexander did a lot of shit. Like, a lot of shit.
Yeah.
But you know, like, that, like, BS statement about, like, how, like, behind every great man is, like, even better woman? Eliza was that woman.
Yeah.
100%.
Yes, absolutely.
That is where that phrase should come from, right there.
If this phrase didn't originate with Eliza, I don't know where it did.
Yeah.
Really.
And the show ends really with her death and with her quest of Hamilton's life and achievements recognized and memorialized. The show doesn't end when Hamilton dies. It ends when Eliza dies.
Yeah.
And also, it was Eliza's, like, dearest life ambition to have, like, a comprehensive biography written about Hamilton. And the whole, like, first chapter of Ron Chernow's book, on which the show is based, is about how Eliza wanted this, and she wanted it so badly. They went through so many biographers, and, like, no one could do the job right. Finally, she just, like, went to her kids, and she's like, listen, I'm your mom, this was your dad, you have to do this for me. So they did, but, like, she died, I think, 2 years before they finished.
Yeah.
So she never got to see it completed.
Wow.
And then obviously now there's been more biographies written. The Chernow biography is really good. That should have been my recommendation. In fact, I'd like to post recommend a recommendation, and that's Ron Chernow's Hamilton biography. Apparently his Washington biography is also really good. But the whole show, there wouldn't be a show without them, so
Yeah, so
highly recommend that. So that's my thoughts. I mean, if anyone else has more thoughts or contrary thought.
I pretty much said that. I like Eliza's whole progression in the musical, specifically from being this helpless, actually word, direct quote helpless, to then she takes charge of her own story, takes herself out of the narrative, and then puts herself back into their narrative.
Yes.
And continues his legacy even though he wasn't able to. So I second all that you said.
I was going to talk exactly about that motif with Eliza later on, but we can discuss it now since you brought it up. And so Eliza, initially in, I think the songs, Would This Be Enough? I actually do know most of the songs by title. Apparently you guys don't. But the song,
apparently we don't.
The song,
it's just a big blur.
Yeah, that's fair. So Eliza initially brings up the idea of a narrative in That Would Be Enough.
Yeah.
She asks if Hamilton would make this the first chapter, in which he decides to say, and she talks about the narrative that they're going to write about his life one day, and then in Burn, she takes herself out of the narrative, and then, in Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Your Story, she puts herself back in the narrative and really campaigns for Hamilton. She did a lot. She interviewed every soldier that fought in the Battle of Yorktown that was still living. Yeah. Everyone that she could get her hands on.
That's
and
insane.
The Washington Monument, and she
did a lot of stuff.
Did so much. And you're so right in the way that, the musical ends at the end of her life.
Yeah.
There would be no story of Hamilton without her.
Exactly.
Because everyone would have forgotten who he was and what he did.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
She's the reason that
his story
either
lived.
of them are remembered.
Yeah.
Moira, do you have anything to add? No.
Covered every point that I had.
Yeah.
Just Eliza was just a better person.
Yeah.
And in general.
Yeah, so we'd like to petition Hamilton, an American Musical, to be Hamilton, an American Musical about Eliza Hamilton.
Yeah.
Alright, so we're going to talk about the Duel to the Death, which is basically the main thing which Hamilton was basically known for before this. He wasn't really known for any of his actual accomplishments, and it's really the main thing that Burr is known for as well, is this duel that they have, in which a vice president of the United States kills the former Treasury Secretary. So, the Duel to Death, was the world wide enough? Is Aaron Burr a villain, or is he hella relatable? If Burr isn't the villain, is Hamilton a villain?
Well,
thoughts?
Okay. So I think the world was for sure wide enough. It would have been wonderful to see. I mean, our history would have been different if he hadn't have died that day, and things would have continued on. I think that the actual death of Hamilton and Burr taking that shot was just a moment of fear from Burr, and though he's painted as the villain, I don't think he actually is a villain. It's hard because, of course, in the musical,
it's told as a story, so there has to be
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. But in real life, it's not as easy, and he is the villain, quote unquote, villain of the duel because he didn't, follow suit with Hamilton and shoot at this guy so they could both live. I think that Hamilton throws away his shot because of what happens to his son, and that he doesn't want to take away someone's life knowing the pain of those felt left behind. And then, of course, I think Burr shoots Hamilton in fear of, he knows the pain of an orphan. I mean, of course, Hamilton does too. But he doesn't want his daughter to go through that. And it's just pure, selfish fear and self-preservation that blinds him from any other consequence. And that's all that he's thinking about, I think, in that moment. And then, I think Burr is relatable in the way that, I can see the side of, Hamilton always gets his way. This is, different from the duel, but just in general, Hamilton always takes big risks and gets, massively rewarded and not punished the way that maybe Burr thinks that there should be. And Burr is always careful and strategic, and yet, still, quote-unquote, suffers or, doesn't reap the rewards he thinks he should. And then, Hamilton to Burr is this reckless, arrogant person who is, like, undeserving of what he has, and which is really ultimately everything that Burr wants.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was great. All of that was great.
I should have paused to let you guys interject, but that was all that I had. And thank you for coming to my TED Talk on Duel to the Death.
Moira, do you have anything to say about the duel?
I think basically, like, neither of them is a villain. Like, in the Duel to the Death, they were just two people who could not agree on how to work together and how to, like, how to work together cohesively. And I think if they had figured it out, the world would be insanely different. Like, I think they would have accomplished so many other things.
Wait, it's just, as much as we just, I just ended the last episode by saying that, Hamilton wasn't a, perfect human being. He did do a lot of shit. Like, and he could have done a lot more. If he lived for another 20 years, like, of the main founding fathers, Hamilton dies super duper young. Washington lives to be 67, and all the other main founding fathers live to be in, like, their 80s. So, like, if Hamilton had lived another, like, 30 or 40 years...
he could have done so many
crazy.
Other things.
Yeah.
If Aaron Burr and him had worked together, they could have done
even
so
more,
much.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I think that's things. The line that I get that Aaron Burr is super relatable is just, honestly, it's kind of draining. And, that's accurate.
That's a good one. Uh-huh.
So I have some things to say. Buckle up, everybody.
I bet. Okay.
As Patrick Hines would say, pull over.
Pull over. This is the moment.
So I talked about the duel in a couple different ways. So I kind of, like, looked at the duel from, like, Burr's point of view and Hamilton's point of view, some things that they were saying.
Okay.
So, like, Burr's point of view is, like, I'm a terrible shot, so I'm probably gonna miss and die. He says, this man has poisoned my political pursuits, which isn't true. I don't know too much about what Hamilton actually said to prompt this duel, like, IRL. But based on the musical, is that he backed Jefferson over him.
Right.
And that's really, you didn't make a good argument in presenting your political leanings. That's not really on Hamilton. That's on you, honey.
Yeah.
And then it's him or me, the world will never be the same. It's the same as, like, I'm a terrible shot. Like, and, like, this man will not make an orphan of my daughter. It's that sense of urgency that it's, one of us is about to die. I don't want it to be me.
Yeah.
I don't think we can fault Burr for that at all.
No.
I think most people feel that way when they're in a life or death situation. Like, I mean, you could have just stuck to your earlier contempt for dueling.
Yeah, that could have worked.
And not had a duel. But since you went for the duel, one of you was going to get shot probably. And, it was this late 1700s, early 1800s. I don't know what day the duel took place in, to be honest. Should have looked that up. But anyway, either way, modern medicine is not what it was today. A gunshot wound was probably gonna get infected and kill you, even if it didn't kill you right away. And then Hamilton is like, my first friend, my enemy, which is like, I love that line so much because it's like, yeah. And then, like, Hamilton has this great line. He says, if I throw away my shot, is this how you'll remember me? What if this bullet is my legacy? And it kind of is.
It is.
Because that was, until this happened and we started to learn more about Hamilton, like, most people, if they knew who Hamilton was at all, they knew he was on the $10 bill, that he was a founding father, and that he got shot by Aaron Burr. That bullet was his legacy. And tied in with that, Burr says, now I'm a villain in your history. And then, I don't know why I added this lyric quote, but I added the lyric, I'm running out of time, and my time's up, which was a callback to my aforementioned potential tattoo idea of the are you running out of time motif from Nonstop. And then I talked a little bit about, like, the aftermath of the duel. So Burr shouts wait even as he fires. Waiting has been his, like, thing, his modus operandi throughout this whole musical. And this is the one time that he doesn't wait, and he destroys his legacy. It's the only time we see him not waiting for it, or talking less and smiling more. And it's the only time that we see Hamilton throw away a shot, because he always keeps saying he's not going to throw away a shot. He does throw away a shot this time, and Burr doesn't wait for it, and Hamilton dies.
Wow.
Goodness.
Burr's first instinct is to go to Hamilton's side, even though he just shot him, which is apparently possibly historically true. Like, he never got to Hamilton's side, but, like, apparently, he did take a couple steps, like, towards Hamilton. And someone's like, no, dude, you just shot that guy.
Yeah, maybe don't.
And then we just kind of talked about, like, history obliterates in every picture it paints me and all my mistakes. And then, like, I survived, but I paid for it. Now I'm the villain in your history. So, yeah, like, Burr is painted as a villain.
Yeah.
Burr did some shit after he shot Hamilton. That, kind of... Yeah, Burr, real life Burr was accused of treason. He might have been framed for this, turns out. But, yeah, he was accused of treason. He was tried and found not guilty of it, like, 3 times, and then he was just exiled to Europe. He just left America altogether. Fun. So, like, this isn't the only thing that he did that, like, didn't look good for him. Yeah. But, it was definitely, like, the end of his career. Like,
yeah.
Did you listen to the Go to Court episode where it's about Aaron Burr's divorce?
No, I haven't, but I'm glad that you brought it up.
It's a good one. I mean, the excitement of them when they realize that it's about, like, oh my god, when they realize that that's who they're talking about, it's incredible.
Fun fact about Aaron Burr's divorce. His wife's lawyer was one of Hamilton's sons.
Yep. Oh, yes, I knew that. Oh, yes. Yep. That was also from the episode, yes.
Yeah. What a great karma.
I can only imagine that Burr walked into that court, realized, and just went, fuck. I shot that man's father. Even if he wasn't representing my wife in our divorce, I shot that man's father. Yep. All right, so we're going to move on. So Lin-Manuel Miranda is a masterful writer. So I want to let us have the opportunity to talk about some of the best writing things that he does in the show.
I'm sure that you have better ones than me, but one of the ones that came to my mind first, like, I included, like, actual written, like, lyrics, but also, like, just elements of the musical, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I like the no's in the background of Say No to This, because it's so, like, the audience, and also I think Hamilton's, like, values and beliefs underneath shouting, like, no, because he wants to say no. The audience wants to say, like, friggin' stop, like, no. And yeah, also parts of Hamilton want to say no, but obviously, like, he doesn't. But I love that element of that song. It's so great.
That's great. That's not on my list. I'm glad.
Okay, I'm glad. I'm sure you have, like, really, like, articulate ones, so... I also like the double kind of meaning of, like, trust fund baby, you can trust me, where it's like trust fund baby and then also baby, you can trust me. I love that. Burr, you disgust me. So you disgust me.
Oh, that's... Yeah,
I mean,
masterpiece.
Oh, I mean, are you serious?
Sorry, that's the Skylar sister.
I knew what you meant. Yeah. And then the way that things are balanced, in the way that, like, Alexander is refuting, whether it's, like, the farmer or the cabinet battles, all the arguments in which, like, the music is the same throughout, but if you listen to, like, whoever he's refuting and then Alexander, just it's so well written in the way that Alexander always fits so much more in. The music is the same, but and it just, like, speaks to the actual... like, life and lifestyle and, like, the whole idea that he's living his life like he's running out of time. So there's always this balance of kind of quote-unquote, like, normal person arguing and then Alexander arguing. And then Philip / Lawrence saying I died for him at the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
When
I didn't talk about that.
Lawrence died, allowing for... Because I read a lot about this and, like, why people think that it's, like... Because obviously Philip is... he dies for his honor, whereas Lawrence kind of dies for him to become what he is and what he does become. And so, because of Lawrence's death, he ends up writing like he's running out of time because of the impact of his death. So the double meaning of that, and I mean all of the characters in that, but especially
every character in that sequence. So it's
has a double.
Yeah, so like it's Madison and Jefferson, or is it Mulligan and Lafayette? Who?
Yeah, we fought for him.
Yeah, we fought with him. Did you fight with him or did you fight with him?
Yes, exactly.
Is it Angelica, Peggy, and Liza who loved him, or Angelica, Peggy, and Mariah Reynolds? Like, it's the same.
Yeah. Yes.
Every interaction in that little section is like two meanings like that. It's really good. But yeah,
it's so incredible.
I like your interpretation of the Lawrence like in particular.
Yes.
That's good.
Yeah, because when I was because he doesn't really die like specifically for him in the way that in the way that Philip does. So
yeah,
that's kind of what I interpret it as. And then of course, like the I couldn't seem to die, and then in the background wait for it, which I'm sure you talk about when we talk about foreshadowing later.
Yes,
but
foreshadowing had to be its own section.
Of course. So it's like foreshadowing to Hamilton's later death, but like also telling the audience to wait for it because this is like an important moment in history and like Hamilton's history specifically. And my mind always thinks of like whenever I hear the wait for it part, and then when he eventually says like I'll write my way out, like that little pause beforehand, my mind goes to like that it's this pause of wait for it, he's about to like come up with an idea. So my mind kind of relates it to like, you know, in the Grinch, when they say the Grinch had a terrible, awful idea kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's what I think of is like, wait for it, there's about to be a wonderful, terrible, awful idea. And then to just finish out some of my favorite writing parts of this that I come up with is, of course, the look back at the Bill of Rights, and then in the background, which I wrote from Madison.
I love that part too. That's one of my favorite parts.
So good. So good. What about you guys? What did you think?
Okay. So I have a lot for foreshadowing, but like Faith said, we're gonna talk about that kind of separately.
Yeah.
So I have a couple things that are just like writing things. So the line, look how lucky we are to be alive right now, is initially from the Schuyler sisters. And then it's used particularly by Eliza in That Would Be Enough, as she pleads for like Hamilton's affection and satisfaction with their life together. And then in Nonstop, Hamilton turns those words around on her, and he says, look how lucky we are to be alive right now, to get what he wants, even though it's not what's going to make Eliza and Angelica happy. And so like I like how like Hamilton kind of like turns her words around on her.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bring back up my credit for Genius Lyrics, because I have maybe a disagreement with some interpretations that they made. So in Nonstop, there's a section where Washington is asking someone to be his right-hand man, and Hamilton's trying to like hurry him along by like prompting like, what do you want me to do? And so Genius Lyrics, who I use all the time in everyday life, interprets this as Washington thinking he needs to convince Hamilton, and then realizing that Hamilton's so on board that he's already like 3 steps ahead. He's already like, yeah, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
But like, just listening to the sound, how I've always interpreted this myself is as Washington's writing that letter to Jefferson that Jefferson gets in What Did I Miss? And he's like kind of somewhat snubbing Hamilton, or like ignoring him to finish the letter, and like kind of just like passing him over as Secretary of State, as like Hamilton was his right-hand man during the war, but like he's gonna ask Jefferson to be Secretary of State. So, if you agree with me, please hit me up on one of our social medias or message me at LifeHasOfKJ. Lin-Manuel Miranda, please weigh in and tell me if I interpreted this correctly.
I love that. I love that interpretation, because I just like, my brain went back to that section, and that's really interesting.
That's how I've always heard it before, and then I was like on Genius Lyrics, and I was like looking through for something else, maybe for one of the like games that we played in the first episode. But yeah, and I was just like, that's not how I interpret this in my own head, and I would just like to know if I'm alone here, or if someone else has interpreted it this way or not. I just interpret it as like Washington like kind of snubbing Hamilton and asking Jefferson to be his right-hand man as Secretary of State.
Yeah, because that first way that you explained from Genius Lyrics, that's how I interpreted it myself, too, so that is super interesting.
And then one last thing I want to talk about before we talk about foreshadowing is helpless and satisfied. Like we said, I mean, obviously, like, having the stage that they have, like, this rotating stage makes this rewind possible, but, like, having a rewind in a musical is crazy. That's not how musicals work. And it's just so beautifully written, and it really shows this. It's the same kind of thing I was talking about with Hamilton and Burr, like, going into the duel. It's, like, the same story from 2 different perspectives. So, like, obviously Helpless is Eliza's interpretation of events, and then Angelica comes in with Satisfied, and she's like, she tells us the exact same story in, like, a totally different way, from a totally different perspective, and we get, like, this whole other aspect to it that is just so beautifully portrayed.
So good.
And like, Satisfied is a just a masterpiece.
Oh, I mean, chef's kiss all the way around. I mean...
Should we just get into the foreshadowing?
So I have one more
thing.
Moira,
sorry, we don't want to rush
before we go in, and then it'll kind of lead into foreshadowing. One of my favorite things about it is the Macbeth references.
Oh, that was the first thing I was going to talk about. Was the Shakespeare.
Yay! So let's just totally transition.
Yeah.
So, like, the lyric that it's like, I'll trust you'll understand the reference to another Scottish tragedy without me having to name the play, and then it's, they think me Macbeth, ambition is my folly. So, for anyone who doesn't know, in theater, you're not allowed to say Macbeth and reference the title of Macbeth while working on a theater or, like, in production, because it's seen as bad luck. But, like, in some cases, people think it's okay to say the name of the character Macbeth, but not of the play. And
wow.
So, and so it's, like, this big thing at all that he put it in a theater show. And then, because he references Scottish tragedy, and then he says the name Macbeth.
Yeah, he intentionally doesn't say it, and then he says it anyway.
And I think that's so funny. And in, like, I don't remember if it was a tweet or in, like, a thing, but someone said to Lynn, like, how did you, like, not do this? Like, didn't you think everything would go badly? And he's like, well, didn't everything go badly in the rest of this show afterwards anyways?
Oh!
And I'm like, what?
Wow.
I'm like, oh my god. And
wow.
Yeah, that just blows my mind every time I listen to it.
I would like to continue this thread, if that's okay.
Yes. Yeah. Go right ahead.
So in this exact exchange, it's part of Take a Break. For reference, we didn't say the song that this occurs in, but it is in Take a Break, and Hamilton compares his life to Macbeth's pretty heavily. He is not subtle about it. There's no real metaphor. He's like, he really compares himself to Macbeth. And if you haven't, it's been a while. I was hoping I wouldn't have to talk as much about what actually happens in Macbeth, but Macbeth is very ambitious, and he becomes king through some not so great decisions and choices. He pays a very heavy price for his rise to power, and then is immediately struck down. And Hamilton pretty much directly compares himself to Macbeth and says that other people are comparing him to Macbeth, and he, has a rise to power and then immediately is struck down. In this, as well, there's another sort of Shakespeare element as a whole to Hamilton. In the opening, we are told right off the bat that Burr shoots Hamilton, which is pretty common to, like, how a lot of Shakespeare plays are. Oftentimes in the first, like, in a prologue or Act 1, Scene 1, we find out how this all ends. For example, in Romeo and Juliet, we're told right off the bat that a pair of star-crossed lovers take their lives. So how does Romeo and Juliet end? Romeo and Juliet kill themselves.
Yep.
So so there is, like, a bit of a Shakespeare element to that as well. Like, we're told right off the bat that Burr's gonna shoot Hamilton, and somehow it's still a surprise, but yeah, and then I feel like I had another Macbeth thing with this Macbeth thing, but I'm sure it'll pop up somewhere down the line in my notes if it wasn't included with this set of Macbeth related notes. One other thing I want to talk about before we get into, like, Burr, because a lot of these are going to be Burr related. Is Hamilton and / Angelica say, I could never be satisfied, or I will never be satisfied, or you could never be satisfied. Right off the bat, the first time that they meet. And guess what, girl? Not satisfied.
It's incredibly true.
I mean, like, that's pretty blatant foreshadowing, but Moira, I'm still thinking about that thing that Moira said, that Lynn said.
Literally.
Wow.
Now I'm gonna have to find it.
Oh my gosh.
Because I'm still thinking about that, because take a break, and then immediately the next thing happens is say no to this. And then
it all goes downhill.
And then Philip dies, and then Hamilton. No, nothing good happens after that.
Nothing.
How does this man's brain even work? I mean,
that's so cool.
I had KJ here to tell you that it's been like 3 or 4 weeks since we recorded this episode, because, we recorded episode 17, 18 at the same time. And I just wanted to say, we're still thinking about this theory about saying Macbeth's name in the middle of this musical. We're still thinking about that. Moira blew our minds by bringing this theory to our attention. We're very much invested in this theory. It's taking up some space in our minds. Wow. Just wow.
Faith, what did you have to say? I'm gonna relinquish the floor until we talk about Burr.
Okay. Some of mine includes Burr, but I'll just kind of list off some of the foreshadowing things that I had, and then I'll let you kind of continue, because I'm sure you have, like, a lot. So, when I was listening, I think that I'm laughing in the face of casualty and sorrow for the first time I'm thinking past tomorrow in my shot. I think that specific first time I'm thinking past tomorrow is obviously, like, now I'm just, like, not worried if I'm gonna live. But it's also, like, to me, exactly the moment in which Hamilton in his life, he becomes aware of the idea of a legacy. And it's unwavering then from that point on to for the rest of his life. Even when Eliza begs him to look around and see what's, like, right here, right in today, he always thinks about his legacy and past tomorrow. He gets stuck in that perpetual tomorrow, how to improve for tomorrow, create his legacy for tomorrow, while also that being combined with his being aware of the threat of death kind of puts him in this mindset of not being able to, like, look around and see what he has right in front of him. And then, so fools who run their mouths off or wind up dead. And then if you talk, you're going to get shot. And then right after, Lawrence interjects, foreshadowing his later death. And then, of course, like, that foreshadows that Alexander's open opinions of Burr, and that he like, quote-unquote, like, runs his mouth. He does end up winding up dead. And then, of course, I wanted to put in most disputes die and no one shoots, because...
Oh, yeah. That line's in here 3 times, because there's 3 duels, and someone gets shot in every single one of them.
Every single one. And I think it's almost, like, becomes foreshadowing, because we get 2 examples where this is said and someone is shot. So, like, by the time it happens again for the 3rd time, I think it becomes foreshadowing for the audience, because you know that that's, like, just not true. Yeah, exactly. And I also put, he will never be satisfied, I will never be satisfied, because it foreshadows, like, in the ways that Alexander and Angelica are both not satisfied, in the way that he isn't satisfied with his romance, his work, his life, his legacy, and then I couldn't seem to die and then wait for it, of course. It's like foreshadowing his death later. And then I also read this thing on a Reddit thread. I should have wrote down who said it, but
if
credit
you find
to
it, we'll add it to the episode.
I'll look for it, because credit to not me. Someone load the gun and cock it. Jefferson says this when only Burr is around.
Oh, I read this Reddit thread, or at least I read this.
So good. So smart.
Yeah.
I mean, little things like that are, like, come on. I mean, the writing in this is so incredible. And then, when's it gonna get me in my sleep 7 feet ahead of me? And then, I read that 7 feet is 10 paces, which is not true. It's like...
7 feet is,
It's gotta be more than that, but... Yeah. If it is, that would be really amazing if 10 paces is 7 feet. Because, of course, Burr is standing at several, because he says several feet later. So several feet ahead of him when he dies.
That's more accurate.
And then I'm not throwing away my shot. And then in the background, you hear Just You Wait during Nonstop.
Oh.
When because he does later throw away his shot, like we mentioned earlier. And that's been my TED Talk on foreshadowing in Hamilton.
Incredible.
All right, I'm gonna follow up with a second TED Talk. Faith just covered a lot of these, but a lot of Burr's advice to Hamilton are about not being prideful or speaking decisively. It's Burr's wounded pride that really leads to his duel with Hamilton, and right off the bat, in Farmer Refuted, Hamilton's, like, really getting into it with Samuel Seabury. And it's Burr who's trying to, like, get him not to, and Hamilton says, I'd rather be divisive than indecisive. Burr is, like, pretty much a narrator in the play. He's one of the only characters that is, like, a narrator. I mean, kind of Eliza in the final song, but other than that, like, Burr narrates a lot more than he actually is present as a character.
Yeah, for sure.
So he has this, like, constant use of how does Hamilton do this at, like, you know, there's quite a few times where songs start that way. How does Hamilton, how does how does a bastard? And, like, they kind of get, like, more questioning and more incredulous, and, the last one's really angry.
Yeah.
He's trying to understand what Hamilton's doing and how, and this is just going to be a breakdown of
okay.
a lot of Hamilton and Burr's interactions and Burr's interactions with other people. So, like, yeah, like, right off the bat when they first meet in Aaron Burr tells them, talk less, smile more, don't let them know what you're against or what you're for. And, like, that's not Hamilton's way.
Yeah.
No.
Mm-hmm.
And then, right in my shot, his face said, you've got to be carefully taught. If you talk, you're going to get shot. And, yeah, Hamilton wasn't too careful because he gets shot.
Yep.
And then in Right Hand Man, Washington tells Burr to close the door on your way out. Burr's there trying to suck up to Washington, and Washington's not for it. And then Hamilton shows up, and Hamilton and Washington are in the room, and they ask Burr to shut the door, so he's not in the room where it happens. And Hamilton
I like that.
He rises to become Washington's right hand man, which is
I like that. I never thought about that.
Yeah,
that's another room where
really cool.
Yeah,
it
that's
happens.
another room he was left out of.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of followed up in The Story of Tonight reprise. Hamilton says that he wishes he had Burr's command. Burr says, I've heard you've made yourself indispensable. And Hamilton's like, well, I didn't want to be indispensable. I wanted what you got. And clearly Burr wants what Hamilton has. Mm-hmm. And Hamilton says, I will never understand you in response. And, like, it's just another of, like, they want what the other one has, and they don't understand each other enough to get what the other one has. Mm-hmm. And then, so kind of the same thing in Wait For It. Burr takes a moment away from his own life to just, like, marvel at what Hamilton's doing. Like, he takes and he takes and he takes, and he keeps winning anyway. He changes the game. And if there's a reason he seems to thrive and survive, then goddammit, I'm willing to wait for it. Mm-hmm. And, like, you can tell Burr, like, increasingly wants what Hamilton has.
Yeah.
And then in the 10 Duel Commandments, they have an exchange. Burr says, can we agree that duels are dumb and immature? And Hamilton says, sure, but your man has to answer for his words, Burr. And then Burr says, with his life, we both know that's absurd, sir. Oh. Which, comes back later, 2 duels later, when it's Burr versus Hamilton. Duels aren't so dumb and immature then.
Yeah.
When you're the one that's calling it. And asking Hamilton to answer for his words. And then, nonstop is, like I said, my favorite. Mm-hmm. The first thing is that Burr says, why do you assume you're the smartest in the room? Soon that attitude may be your doom. Mm-hmm. Which is, a warning.
Yep.
And then it follows that up with, why do you always say what you believe? Every proclamation guarantees free ammunition for your enemies. So, like, what you say is going to be used against you by the people that don't like you. And then when they get into the debate about defending the Constitution, writing the Federalist Papers, Burr says, and what if you're backing the wrong horse? Which, obviously the Constitution is what they're discussing there, but also Jefferson in the election backs the wrong horse, and Burr kills him for it.
Wow, I never thought about that one.
Dang.
And then Hamilton says, I don't understand how you stand to the side, which is exactly Hamilton. Again, Hamilton's just like, I don't get what you're doing. Mm-hmm. I don't understand. Then I had that whole, like, how do you write like you're running out of time, write day and night like you're running out of time.
Yep.
Every day you fight like right. And we know Hamilton is running out of time, like Faith said. And he's living life like it's gonna be tomorrow. We don't... And then when you actually watch, this is something you only get if you actually watch it, the first act ends with Hamilton, like, basically abandoning his wife and Angelica in that moment I discussed in the first episode to join Washington at the top of the stairs. So Hamilton runs up the stairs to join Washington at the top, and and Angelica and Eliza both move to the sides of the stage, but Burr is standing at the bottom of the stairs with his back to the audience. He's looking up at Hamilton and Washington from the bottom of the stairs. Ooh. And they're standing up there. And then, the like song ends with "History has its eyes on you."
Wow.
Yeah, it's a really good image.
So I can see it in my mind.
Yeah, honestly. And then obviously we get to like the room where it happens, and that's when I've seen a few different interpretations of the lines. All you had to do was die. That's a lot less work. We ought to give it a try. So some people interpret this as Burr wanting Hamilton to die. Mm-hmm. I interpret that as two people who are so obsessed with their legacy and what people think about them that like, they're like, well, we could just both die. Like, we could have died war heroes and we wouldn't have to worry about this. But since we survived the war, now we have to do something better to get remembered, or else we're not going to get remembered. And then Hamilton parrots Burr's talk less, smile more back at him, turns his own words back on him exactly the same way that he did with Eliza in Nonstop. And then Burr kind of does the same thing to Hamilton in the election of 1800 1800, he says, "Is there anything you wouldn't do?" And Burr says, "No, I'm chasing what I want, and you know what, I learned that from you." And it's like they're trying each other's strategies, but like, and like,
but also, hating each other at the same time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're trying each other's strategies, but they don't work for each other. Like, Burr tries to go for what he wants, but he doesn't stand for anything. He just stands for his own gain. And then Hamilton's just not good at talking less and smiling anymore.
Right.
And like the time he does try and talk it out, he can't get out of it. He's in a situation where he can't. It's too late to talk himself out of it. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't try as hard. And then just like some like character motivation for Burr. The ensemble says, "We want our leaders to save the day," which is like this like idealized ideal of like what political leaders are supposed to be doing for us. And then Burr says, "But we don't get a say in what they trade away."
I love that part. I love that. That's such a good part.
And it's just like Burr doesn't have this idealized version of politicians, but like he's more concerned about what he's giving up or what he's gaining than he is. For sure. And the same thing when Hamilton like comes out of the dinner and he has what he wants. Like Burr's like, "You wanted what you gave away," and Hamilton says, "Yeah, but I wanted the thing that I got was the thing that I wanted." Yeah. And like Burr doesn't really seem to understand that. He's more concerned about like what Hamilton gave away. Yeah.
Right.
And then obviously in Scholar Defeat he says, "I swear your pride will be the death of us all. Beware it goeth before the fall," which is like a great biblical reference. And then B is like it's funny because it could be it is kind of Hamilton's pride, but it's also Burr's pride. The thing he's warning against that is actually Hamilton's undoing. It's not Hamilton's pride. Yep. And then Faith already brought up the Burr and Jefferson. Oh, this is where my other Macbeth reference was. Found it. So
okay, found it.
Like Faith said, Burr's the only one on the stage when Jefferson says, "I'll pull the trigger on him, someone load the gun and cock it." Mm-hmm. And then this also, comes back to the comparison Hamilton was making about Macbeth, because he compares Jefferson to Macduff, and Macduff is the one that kills Macbeth in Macbeth. Yeah. But and Jefferson also seems willing here to be Hamilton's fatal foe. Like, it doesn't have to be Burr. It could have just as easily been Jefferson.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you kind of almost get the sense, like, maybe we don't really know that much about like Jefferson's character as a real life person, or like in the play in this sense, but like it's almost like Hamilton was kind of like a catch-22, like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Like if he backed Burr, like who's to say that Jefferson wouldn't have challenged him to a duel?
That's interesting. Yeah, because it's like set up to be that way, that maybe like in another like in another world, like Jefferson was going to be the one to kill him. Because, like, Burr is set up to be, his character always waits for it, wait. And then right when he decides not to. Yeah. Like, it's like a character change, a different decision for him. So, it's like set up to be Jefferson, and then it's Burr.
Yeah, and then in the election of 1800, something else that happens is there is a reference to Newton's third law of motion. Every action has an equal opposite reaction. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's in reference to John Adams sucking as president. But it's also like Hamilton made his bed and now he's lying in it. Like he backed Jefferson and now he has to answer. Yeah.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, I like that too.
Yeah, like this was his chance to back Burr and he doesn't. Mm-hmm. Dang. And then one last one about them is in Your Obedient Servant. Burr says, "As I reckon with the effects of your life on mine, I look back on where I failed, and at every place I checked, the only common thread has been your disrespect." And like that's such a good line, but also like
such a good line.
We know isn't necessarily the truth either. Yeah. Right. But it's just like it's the same thing I talked about when I talked about the duel. It's like Burr sees Hamilton as like someone who's intentionally gone out of his way to harm him, when really Hamilton's just like, yeah, you could have stood for something. Yeah. Yeah. Like I tried to be your friend. You were my friend. I wish I'd ended on one that was like more like
that was great. But it's so amazing, like, talking to others about this, because, like, there's always other things that other people pick up on, and so many ways it can be interpreted, and oh my goodness, so amazing.
Honestly. Yeah, Faith and Moira both blew my mind a little bit, so I consider this a success.
Yes, for sure. Oh, so fun.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is we are going to talk about some of the songs that were cut or, like, were rewritten. So, so we're going to talk about some of those songs, and we're going to compare them to the actual final versions that made it in.
Yeah, I The only one that I had heard, okay, I'm a noob, okay, so nobody come for me. The only one I had heard out of the ones that KJ listed was First Burn. I had heard that before, and I'm obsessed, obviously.
Yeah.
Like, Burn is amazing, but, like, also the hearing more of her side, and the fact that Eliza is not, she announces herself to not be as naive as maybe Hamilton, like, thinks that she is.
Yeah.
And that she knows way more than anyone ever could have known that she had picked up on before this actually happened. So I love, obviously, First Burn is incredible, but the other two non-official songs.
Yeah, which are Congratulations and Ben's cut of Skylar Defeated. Is that the other one that you talked about?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Was there another? Was it?
I added.
There was another one. You added one. Yeah. But yeah, those two I hadn't heard. I only heard like yesterday or the day before when I was prepping. Mm-hmm. So I think Congratulations is amazing. Of course, More Angelica content is incredible. Like hearing her anger, because I think that it's obviously like an important part of like the Reynolds pamphlet, but oh my gosh, hearing more of her thoughts and anger towards him is incredible. And then I really liked like more of Eliza and Philip's interaction in Ben's cut of Skylar Defeated as well. But that's kind of all that I had on those.
Yeah.
Because I'm not super, like, it's not songs that I've been like listening to nonstop.
Yeah.
So
Fair.
I'm really interested to hear what you guys thought about these extra songs and...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Moira, do you have anything that you want to say about any of them in particular, or do you want to go like through one by one, or what do you want to do?
I can just talk about like all three at once because I don't have much for all of them.
Okay.
So like with Congratulations, like I know that Reynolds Pamphlet like makes more sense with the story, and I understand that, but I love Congratulations so much. Just angry Angelica being sassy, it's incredible. I love it so much, and I listen to that a lot. And I sometimes listen to it at a faster speed just because it's super funny. I love First Burn and Burn pretty much equally. And I also like to listen to them like back to back, so it feels like it's just like one super long story with only like a few
how
common
good
things.
would that be?
Yeah, it's just so great. And I didn't listen to like Ben's cut of Skylar Defeated until today. So I'm like, it's very cool. I think it was interesting. But so far I like the other one better because I have not listened to it as much.
Fair.
So, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to talk... Okay, you guys talked about those three. I'm going to talk about them, like, quickly, but not too much, and then there's kind of, like, two that I didn't really include or give you guys time to talk about, so...
Okay.
I'll focus. Sounds good. So, Congratulations versus the Reynolds pamphlet. Like Moira said, Congratulations is just, like, basically an extension of Angelica's portion of the Reynolds pamphlet. I really like some of the lyrics that are in Congratulations that didn't make the cut. I think it adds some more heat to Angelica, but also some, like, sadness. Like, I languished in a loveless marriage. I lived only to read your letters. The lyric, I think, God, what have we done with our lives and where did it get us? Like, that crushes me. There's one Hamilton line in Congratulations that I want to talk about. It's the only thing he says. He says it was an act of political sacrifice, and I think that says a lot about his character and who he is. It's like, this political sacrifice is worth it to him still. Yeah. Lynn said somewhere, I don't know where, that most people cared about Eliza's reaction to the Reynolds pamphlet, like, more than Angelica's, which is fair, because, it's her husband. So it makes sense to just, like, take the good parts of Congratulations and just, like, put them in the Reynolds pamphlet. They fit really well there. Like, you'd have to separate it from the Reynolds pamphlet to make it, like, work in terms of, like, timing. Right. So, like, I think that the part that they use is plenty. I think that, it works. I read a really good Reddit post defending Burn and, like, why Burn is actually better than First Burn.
Ooh, interesting.
I don't agree with a lot of the reasoning that they gave, but it made me think about it a lot more because I actually do really enjoy First Burn. So I'll link that Reddit post in our episode description as well. There's a big tonal difference between First Burn and Burn. First Burn is much angrier and a bit louder. Burn is more that thing when, like, people get, like, quiet mad that's, like, actually like, much scarier. And, like, makes you feel way worse. It like adds guilt to your fear and like I think it gives it like Eliza like a more quiet like power. I think like if they weren't in the context of the show as a whole, I think I do actually prefer first Burn with the harmonizing, but in the context of the show, Burn is much more in character for Eliza.
Very true.
I hadn't really thought about the thing that Faith said about like more about Eliza knowing more about what Hamilton's been up to than we found out in Burn, and I like that. But yeah, like the lyrics that I picked out that I love from First Burn were like, "Heaven forbid someone whisper he's part of some scheme. Your enemy whispers, so you have to scream."
So
that's just, like,
good.
Yeah, like that. Like, oh, I felt that. It's so good. And then she follows it up with, "I know about whispers. I see how you look at my sister." And
oh my god,
Eliza
so
knows.
good.
And then, and when the time comes to explain to the children the pain and embarrassment you put their mother through, when will you learn that they are your legacy? We are your legacy. Like, that hit me. Because,
gosh.
Hamilton's so obsessed with his legacy, and his legacy really does end up being his family, because, like, in real life, that's exactly it. Like, Hamilton dies, and he leaves Eliza and his 7 kids to remember him, and, they have to fight tooth and nail to get this biography done, and it takes, 50 years for them to do it. Yeah, like, if it wasn't for them, there would be nothing. They really ended up being his legacy.
Yeah.
So then Ben's Scholar Defeated and Scholar Defeated. The real difference is, like, this is more, like, between when Burr becomes, while Burr's becoming senator and, like, before he's into the election of 1800. There's some really good lines, like, he'll consider this a personal slander. I've got to stop a homicide. Eliza's just like, yeah, he about to murder Burr, which would have been a twist. And I actually like that line. It's really funny, but I'm actually glad that they cut it. Yeah, because it just like adds a whole extra dimension. We get a lot more information about Burr's personal life, that his wife's sick, his daughter's been super educated, because that's actually one thing I like about Burr is like he educated his daughter like fully, like as though she was his son. And then Hamilton says, I'll grab a pen and paper. You swing at my family, you better not miss, which is just classic Hamilton. He's gonna write his way out of this. Yep. Which is amazing. And then with Ben's cut of Scholar Defeated, there's another deleted song called Let It Go that I like added in to like kind of last minute. So Eliza's part is really, really catchy in it, so I really like that. But there's not really time for all this like Burr getting elected stuff, and they basically just kind of like take the line, like Burr's parts from Let It Go and put them into the election of 1800. Something I really like is someone says they'll make the personal political, because Hamilton's really upset that Burr took a shot at him and his father-in-law. And then someone else says, let everybody know that you can take a body blow to Hamilton. Ooh. Like, take the hit and get past it, and like let everyone know that you're gonna be fine if you take this hit, like this political hit. And like that's actually really interesting, because this would come before the Reynolds pamphlet. And so like if that had been left in, I think that would have made Hamilton's like whole like I'm gonna take a political sacrifice to get some other political gain. And then the other song I want to talk about, which there's way more deleted songs, like
there's so many,
is 10 Things One Thing, which is basically another version of The World Was Wide Enough.
Oh my gosh.
And they're pretty similar. The main thing that's missing from 10 Things One Thing is it doesn't have this Hamilton a cappella soliloquy. His thoughts are set to music. So we get Burr's count up to his shot, so we go like through the 10 dual commandments, and then we count down, and then Hamilton says, and when they get to 2, then Hamilton says one last thought, which is like my favorite thing. Oh. It's so good. It's so nice. I wish that Lynn had actually left that in, and then like done the soliloquy bit, because I actually really like the soliloquy now, because I didn't love it when it was just like on its own, but like in context of the show I love it. So I actually wish he'd left this like one last thought in, and then got into that. And then we go through the 10, we count back up to 10 the same way we did with Burr with Hamilton. I actually really like this like disorganized inner monologue character choice that Lynn made for Hamilton with this soliloquy, kind of like without music. So I actually am not mad that this got changed. It's just like that one line I really liked, and we get some different thoughts from Hamilton that aren't the thoughts that were in the show. Cool. Alright, so we're gonna move on from the deleted stuff into, like, the theme, overall message, through line, main idea of Hamilton. Does somebody want to start?
Yeah, so what I think that, like, overall has a lot of different themes, but for me, the overall, like, through line and message, I guess, of it is, like, the value of hard work and, like, how much impact you can do whether it's Hamilton and his impact, but like mostly Eliza, her impact, both for the good and the bad. All characters like had some kind of an impact on history and on others. Overall, like your legacy, what you leave behind, and like ultimately never knowing like who is gonna be the one to tell your story. So like kind of don't like burn bridges maybe, because you don't know who's gonna be the one to carry on after you're gone.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Moira, what did you think?
I didn't really have anything written down, but I completely agree with Faith. Those were really cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with Faith, but like frame it way longer because that's my way.
Yeah. Okay.
So like I think ideally this could all be summed up in like one line of the show, which is "Who lives, who dies, who tells your story."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have a quote from Grey's Anatomy because why not make
Ooh,
the
of course. I mean,
there's a quote from season 6, episode 24 of Grey's Anatomy, "Death and All His Friends," and that's
the human life is made up of choices: yes or no, in or out, up or down, and then there are the choices that matter: to love or hate, to be a hero or to be a coward, to fight or to give in, to live or die.
that's the important choice, and it's not always in our hands.
wow.
Derek Shepherd.
Wow.
So yeah, like Hamilton and Burr are both very much consumed by their legacy and how they're going to be remembered.
Mm-hmm.
Washington's the one that says you have no control who lives, who dies, who tells your story, but in the exact same song he says history has its eyes on you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Washington talks quite a lot about his own legacy. Like, in his initial introduction in Right Hand Man, he says, "The venerated Virginian veteran whose men are all lining up to put me up on a pedestal, writing letters to relatives embellishing my elegance and eloquence."
Mm-hmm.
And, like, so he's, like, talking about how, like, other people are writing about him, and, like, there's a lot of accounts, apparently, that, like, Washington wasn't super comfortable about how the soldiers that, like, served under him wrote about him. Like,
Right.
they really, like, idolized him and, like, contributed to a lot of, like, the mythology we have about Washington today.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of something he brings up on his own, and then he brings it up to Hamilton as well. Like, you're gonna die and someone's gonna tell your story, and you don't have any say about who that is or how they do it. And then, like, also like what you do, especially when you're involved in this, like, shaping of a nation, is gonna go down in history. And then we already talked about, like, Eliza and the narrative motif of wanting to be part of the narrative, take yourself out, then bring yourself back in. In the Reynolds pamphlet, or I guess it's in Burn, not in the Reynolds pamphlet, but in Burn, when Eliza's talking about the Reynolds pamphlet, she says, "You and your words, obsessed with your legacy, your sentences border on senseless, and you're paranoid in every paragraph how they perceive you."
Mm-hmm.
And then she says, like, "They don't get to know what I said. I'm burning the memories, burning the letters that might have redeemed you." And so, like, Eliza's very well aware that Hamilton cares about his legacy more than he cares about her, or more than he cares about their family together. Yeah. And also, like, she's like, "These letters that you wrote me that made me fall in love with you, they are basically the opposite of everything that's in the Reynolds pamphlet. And, like, I'm gonna burn them so that you can never have this element of your story redeemed. Like, that part of your legacy's gone."
Yeah, if you want to put this out there, like, that's all you'll have out there then.
Yeah, if you want to tell the story of the Reynolds pamphlet, then that's the story that you're going to tell, and I'm not going to give you anything to turn that around.
Yep.
In Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Their Story, Eliza says, "And when my time is up, have I done enough? Will they tell," she said, first time she says, "Will they tell your story?" Then she says, "Will they tell our story?" And then she says, "Will they tell my story?"
Mm-hmm.
Like, she really did dedicate her life to having him memorialized, and, like, his life achievements, and that kind of, like, becomes her story as well. Angelica says, "Every other founding father's story gets told, every other founding father gets to grow old." Like, Hamilton was so obsessed with his legacy, and then he dies, and he dies so young, and, like, he's not acknowledged on the same level as any of the other founding fathers that lived to old ages, so they got to live fuller lives.
Yeah.
And they got remembered for it. And he didn't get that.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And we already talked about how Burr says the line, like, "Now I'm the villain in your history." Burr did a lot of good stuff, or, like, at least believed. Like, Burr was for abolishing slavery. He was a feminist. He educated his child.
Yes.
He lived a pretty rough life. Like, he was an orphan, just like Hamilton. I mean, he was wealthy, was the big difference. But, like, he was still an orphan. His wife dies. His daughter is lost at sea. Like, some shit happens to Burr. But he's remembered mostly career-wise anyways for, like, this one time that he dueled and killed Alexander Hamilton. And then, like I said, he was accused of treason and exiled to Europe. And then, Hamilton, like, ruined his family life with the Reynolds pamphlet. And clearly that was his story. He says, if they tell my story, I'm either going to die on the battlefield in glory or I'm going to rise up. Like, that's clearly his priority. So I think the point of the musical isn't just, like, this man was incredible. Like, imagine if he had lived to be 67 or into his 80s like the other founding fathers, which, I mean, obviously, he did a lot, but, like, it doesn't really matter what you do, like Faith said. It matters who's going to be left behind to tell your story and the lens that they're going to tell that story through. Yeah. There are very few people in history who are actually good or evil. There's just how we frame them. I mean, I'm not going to defend, like, Adolf Hitler or something like that, but I'm sure he did something good at least one time in his life, but then he orchestrated a war and a genocide that killed millions of people. So, like, yeah, we can frame that as bad in history. Mm-hmm. But, like, I think, yeah, like, you know, if it wasn't for Eliza, Hamilton would never have been remembered. Yeah, and, for sure. Like, you know, he's lucky that she came around on his transgressions, because, like, if they had never reconciled after the Reynolds Pamphlet, like, he would have died, like, as a footnote in history. Like, he would have been that guy that signed the Constitution, that guy that wrote the Federalist Papers. Like, no one would care. Yeah, exactly. We wouldn't have just spent, like, 4 hours talking about it. Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I got to say about about that.
That was really, it was well said. That was really good.
Do we feel like we have time to do under segments?
Yeah, we could do our randomized rankings.
Yeah, so our under segments are something we do at the end of the show. Obviously, we didn't do them last week because we weren't at the end of the topic. Right. So we have Love It or Lose It, which is one thing you loved, one thing you hated. We just talked for, like, hours about Hamilton.
About what we love and hate.
So we're skipping that. Are going to do randomized rankings, which is choosing 5 mainish characters at random and ranking them. And maybe I'll find the unranked ones to list off who we're picking from this week. We have George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, Elizabeth Schuyler, Hamilton, Philip Hamilton, and James Madison. Maybe someone else can go first, because I just...
Sure, yeah. Take a sip of water. Rest your... Our voices are going to be shot after this, because we recorded last episode and this episode in one sitting, so... I have to pee, so... Okay, so for me, number 1 is, of course, Eliza / Elizabeth Schuyler Hamilton. I freaking love her so much. And then second... And I also wanted to just say, this is based purely on the musical. I'm super not, like, history. I wouldn't consider myself, well-versed in history in general, so purely musical characters in this list. And so, second, I have George Washington. Third, I have Philip Hamilton. Fourth, I have Alexander Hamilton. And last, I have James Madison, just because he's not, like, a developed character in the actual musical. It's just... That's my ranking.
Moira, do you want to go next?
Yeah, for sure. Mine is also musical-oriented. Mm-hmm. Can't deal with the history side of it. Just not going to go there. Mm-hmm. So, my list is Eliza at number 1, Philip, and then James, and then George Washington, and then Alexander Hamilton.
Ooh, you're mad at Alexander Hamilton.
I do not like Alexander Hamilton.
Yeah, fair.
Well, I'm glad that we were all Eliza number 1, and then different everywhere else. Mine is Eliza number 1, and then James Madison number 2, mostly for which I wrote. When it comes True. Yeah. And for Washington on your side, and then for Hamilton on your side in the Lecture of 1800. Madison's actually very funny in the musical.
Yeah, very funny, for sure.
Yeah. And then Alexander Hamilton. And then Philip Hamilton, just because he wasn't present for very much. Yeah. And like, all of the parts he was present made me cry or laugh. And, crying is... Yeah, and then last I have George Washington, which is mostly history-related. The other ones were musical-related, but that one's history-related.
That's very valid.
Christopher Jackson is a wonderful human being.
Yes.
I think that's why... I think that's why George Washington is so high on my list, is because of him. I mean... Yeah. I couldn't think George Washington and not see his beautiful face.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'd like to never picture that, like, painting of the guy in the wig ever again. I'm just going to picture Christopher Jackson from here on out. It'll make my life better.
Honestly.
So anyway, our third under segment is I Would Name My Kid That, which is when we pick out baby names, but we're going to be skipping that as well.
Yeah, none that particularly sparked my heart this week.
Anything that I think particularly sparks us, we've already called out in previous episodes. this was our second part of our Hamilton episode. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that. Again, please hit us up on all of our social media to discuss all of the Hamilton things. We got into a lot of more theory in this episode, so please debate all of that with us. You can find the show. You can email us at seriesofopinionspod@gmail.com. And you can find us on Tumblr and Instagram at seriesofopinionspod. And you can find us on Twitter at seriesofopinion. And you can talk to me at Life Messes of KJ on everything, and I would be happy to hear from you.
Please. You can find me at Miss Faith Ann across everything, and for my art at Faith Ann Art.
And you can find me at Moira_Frisk on everything.
And we will be back next week to talk about some of our favorite ships. So we will see you next week.
Our logo is by Faith Ebert, who you can find at Faith Ann Art. This podcast was written, produced, and recorded by us, and it was edited by me, editing KJ.
Bye!
Bye!